Welcome to Love's Tender Flame, Tales of Romance. I'm Ardell, reading Come Out of the Kitchen by Alice Duer Miller. Chapter 8. Mrs. Falkener never came down to breakfast. At 9 to the minute, her bell tinkled, and Lily staggered up to her room bearing a tray, from which it subsequently appeared many essentials had been forgotten. The next 10 minutes were spent by the unfortunate housemaid in trips to the pantry in search of salt, powdered sugar, or a tea strainer. Cora, however, came down and poured out coffee for the two men. She looked handsome and vigorous in this occupation, and Crane, sitting opposite to her, wondered if it were his destiny to sit so for the rest of his life. He watched her thin white hands, strong as steel they were, moving about among the cups. He had once admired them intensely, but now he knew that hands did not have to be so firm and muscular to accomplish wonderful achievements in all sorts of ways. At 10, Mrs. Falkener came swimming down the stairs, all suavity and brightness. The evening before, while Crane had been struggling with the problem of Brindlebury's misdeeds, she and Tucker had had another council of war. A new attack upon the cook had been planned, which they felt sure would bring to light delinquencies that even Crane could not overlook. "Come, Burton," she said as she entered the sitting room. "Aren't you ever going to offer to show me the kitchen? You know that to an old-fashioned housekeeper like myself it is the most interesting part of the whole house." Such interest, Crane felt inclined to answer, was not confined to old-fashioned housekeepers. Her suggestion roused conflicting desires in him: the desire to see Jane Ellen, and the desire to protect her from Mrs. Falkener. "Tuck could tell us all about it," he said slyly. Tucker, who was reading the paper, pretended not to hear, and presently Crane rang the bell. "Tell the cook, Smithfield," he said, "that Mrs. Falkener and I are coming down to inspect the kitchen in about 10 minutes. When Smithfield had gone, Mrs. Falkener shook her finger at Crane. "That was a mistake, my dear Burton," she said. "A great mistake. Take them unaware whenever you can. It is the only way to protect ourselves against the unscrupulous members of their class." "Crane," said Tucker, without looking up from his paper, "wants to give the young woman plenty of time to smuggle out any superfluous young man who may be visiting her at the moment." "Well, I'm no gumshoe man, Tuck," Burton replied, leaving all of his hearers in doubt as to whether or not he had emphasized the word "I." Tucker laughed sarcastically. "No, my dear fellow," he answered, "your best friend would not accuse you of having talents along the detective line." "Perhaps not," replied Crane. "And by the way, did I tell you that the miniature had turned up all right?" Tucker's face fell. He had depended a good deal on the loss of the miniature as a lever to oust the whole set of servants. "No," he said. "Where was it discovered?" "Oh, it had just been moved," answered Crane. "It was lying on another table when I happened to notice it." He took it out of his pocket and looked at it. "I think now I'll keep it in my room for safety. You approve of that, don't you, Tuck?" Tucker, who felt that in some way he was being deceived, would not answer. And in the pause, Mrs. Falkener rose and said chattily, "Well, shall we be off?" "Coming with us, Solon?" "No, I'm not," returned Tucker crossly. Didn't mean to offend you, Crane answered. I thought you liked kitchens too. Downstairs, they found the kitchen empty. Jane Ellen was standing just outside the door, watching Willoughby, who was exciting himself most unnecessarily over preparations which he was making to catch a bird that was hopping about in the grass nearby. The great cat crouched all still, except the end of his tail, which twitched ominously. Then he rose and, balancing himself almost imperceptibly on his four paws, seemed about to spring. Then, abandoning this method too, he crept a little nearer to his victim, his stomach almost touching the earth. And then the whole exhibition was ended by the bird, who, having accomplished its foraging expedition, lightly flew away, leaving Willoughby looking as foolish as a cat ever does look. Jane Ellen stooped and patted him. "You silly dear," she said caressingly. It was Willoughby who first saw Crane. With a vivid recollection of the previous evening's feast of chicken from the salad, the cat ran to him and bumped his nose repeatedly against Crane's legs in token of fealty and gratitude. Burton felt unduly flattered. He lifted Willoughby, who instantly made himself very soft and heavy in his arms, and showed every disposition to settle down and go to sleep. Mrs. Falkener looked at him sentimentally. "How all animals take to you, Burton, at first sight," she said. Crane bent over and replaced Willoughby slowly on the ground, while Jane Ellen turned her head away for an instant. Mrs. Falkener went on. "What a nice, bright kitchen you have, Jane Ellen. A good range, though old-fashioned. How bright you keep your copper. That's right." She wandered away in her tour of inspection. "See, Burton, this blue plate. It looks to me as if it might have value. And this oak dresser, it must be 200 years old." She was across the room and her back was turned. Crane and the cook stood looking at each other. "How charming! How interesting!" Mrs. Falconer continued. "And you would not believe me when I said that the kitchen was the most interesting part of the house." "I did not disagree with that," said Crane, still looking at Jane Ellen. "Ah, my dear boy, you would never have come down if I had not made you." "One doesn't always do what one wants to do," said Crane. Mrs. Falconer turned. The kitchen had revealed none of the enormities she had expected, not even a man hidden in the kitchen closet, the door of which she had hopefully opened. But one chance still remained, the icebox. In her time she had known many incriminating iceboxes. She called loudly to be taken to it. "It's this way, madam," said the cook. Mrs. Falconer drew Crane aside. "That," she said, "is the very best way to judge of a cook's economical powers. See how much she saves of the dishes that come from the upstairs table. Now, last night I happened to notice that the chicken salad went downstairs almost untouched." For the first time in years, Burton found himself coloring. "Oh, really?" he stammered. I had an idea that we'd eaten quite a lot of it." "No," returned Mrs. Falconer firmly. "No, a good dish went down. Let us go and see." Crane glanced at Jane Ellen. He thought she had overheard. They reached the icebox. The cook lifted the lid, and Mrs. Falconer looked in. The first sight that greeted her eyes was the platter that had borne the salad she had liked so much it was almost empty. "Why, Jane Ellen," she said, "where is all the rest of that excellent salad?" At this question, Jane Ellen, who was standing beside the chest, gave the lid a slight downward impulsion, so that it suddenly closed with a loud, heavy report within half an inch of Mrs. Falkener's nose. That lady turned to Burton. "Burton," she said with a majesty of which she was at times capable, "I leave it to you to decide whether or not this impossible young woman did that on purpose." And so saying, she swept away up the stairs like a goddess reascending Olympus. "Look here, Jane Ellen," said Crane, "I don't stand for that." "Oh, sir," replied the culprit, with a return to an earlier manner, "you surely don't think I had anything to do with it?" "Unhappily, I was watching your hand at the time, and I know that you had." Jane Ellen completely changed her method. "Ah, well," she said, "you did not want her going on any more about the old salad, did you?" "I don't want the end of my guest's nose taken off." "It's rather a long nose," said the cook dispassionately. "Jane Ellen, I am seriously displeased." At this, the cook had a new idea. She extracted a very small handkerchief from her pocket and unfolded it as she said, "Yes, indeed, sir, I suppose I did utterly forget my place. But it's rather hard on a poor girl. One day you treat her as if she were an empress, and the next just as if she were mud under your feet." She pressed the handkerchief to her eyes. "Jane Ellen, you know I never treated you like mud under my feet." "It was only last night, in my brother's room," she went on tearfully, "that you scolded me for not being candid, and now, at the very first candid thing I do, you turn on me like a lion." At this point Crane removed her hands and handkerchief from before her face and revealed the fact which he had already suspected, that she was smiling all the time. "Jane Ellen, what a dreadful fraud you are," he said quite seriously. "No, Mr. Crane," answered Jane Ellen, briskly tucking away her handkerchief, now that its usefulness was over. "No, I'm not exactly a fraud. It's just that that's my way of enjoying myself, and sometimes I think other people enjoy it too." "Do you think Mrs. Falkener enjoys it?" "I wasn't thinking of Mrs. Falkener," replied Jane Ellen with a twinkle in her eyes. "Burton!" called Mrs. Falkener's voice from the head of the stairs. Crane and his cook drew slightly closer together as if against a common enemy. "Do you suppose she can have heard us?" he asked. "I think she's perfectly capable of trying to hear." Crane smiled. "I took a great risk, Jane Ellen, when I advised you to be candid." "Burton!" said the voice again. "Merciful powers!" exclaimed Crane. "She calls like Juliet's nurse." The cook laughed. "But you must be prompter than Juliet was." "What do you know about Shakespeare, Jane Ellen?" "Moving pictures have been a great education to the lower classes, you know, sir." He moved toward the stairs, but turned back to say, "Goodbye, Jane Ellen." She answered, "Think you that we shall ever meet again?" And then even she seemed to feel that she had committed an imprudence, and she dashed away to the kitchen. Crane ascended the stairs slowly, for he was trying to recall the lines that followed Juliet's pathetic question, when suddenly he became aware of Mrs. Falconer's feet planted firmly on the top step, and then of that lady's whole majestic presence. He pulled himself together with an effort. "Do you suppose that girl could have dropped that lid on purpose?" he asked, as if this were the question he had been so deeply pondering. "I do not feel the least doubt of it," returned Mrs. Falconer. He shook his head. "It seems almost incredible," he answered, moving swiftly across the hall toward the sitting room, where Tucker and Miss Falconer were visible. "On the contrary," replied the elder lady, "it seems to me perfectly in keeping with the whole conduct of this extraordinary young person. They had now entered the room, and she included Tucker and her daughter in an account of the incident. You know, Solon, and you too, Cora, how easy I am on servants. I must admit, everyone will confirm it, that my own servants adore me. They adore me, don't they, Cora? No wonder. I see to their comfort. They have their own bath and a sitting room, far better than anything I had myself as a young woman. But in return, I do demand respect, absolute respect. And when I am looking into an ice box, examining it, at Burton's special request, to have that young minx slam down the lid, almost catching my nose, Solon, I assure you, almost touching my nose as she did it. Tucker listened attentively, tapping his eyeglass on his left palm. Then he said, "And what did you do about it, Burton?" Crane had gone to the bookcases and taken down a volume of Shakespeare. He was so profoundly immersed that Tucker had to repeat his question. This is what he was reading. Juliet, think you that we shall ever meet again? Romeo, I doubt it not, and all our woes shall serve for pleasant converse in the days to come. He looked up vainly, trying to repress a smile. What did I do about what, Tuck? About your cook's insulting Mrs. Falkener. Crane replaced the volume and walked to the window. Oh, he said, I stayed behind a moment. A moment, said Mrs. Falkener, with something that would have been a snort in one less self-controlled. At this instant, Crane's attention was attracted by a figure he saw crossing the grounds, and he decided to create a diversion. Oh, look, he exclaimed, do come and see the housemaid going out for a walk. Did you ever see anything smarter than she looks? The diversion was of a more exciting nature than he had intended. Mrs. Falkener came to the window, and uttering a piercing exclamation, she cried, "The woman has on Cora's best hat!" Not really, said Crane, but it did seem to him he remembered having seen the hat before. It is, Mrs. Falkener went on in some excitement. Call her back at once, Solon. Do something. Call the woman back. Tucker, thus appealed to, threw open the window, and with an extremely credible volume of voice he roared, "Lily!" The girl started and turned. He beckoned imperiously. She approached. "Come in here at once," he said sternly. Mrs. Falkener sank into a chair. This really is too much," she said, making fluttering gestures with her hands. "Even you, Burton, will admit this is too much. Stand by me, Solon." "Don't say even I, Mrs. Falkener," returned Crane, as if I had been indifferent to your comfort. "Don't be so excited, Mother," said Cora. "You know it probably isn't my hat at all. Lily has probably been copying mine." Mrs. Falkener shook her head. "I should know a Diane Duray model anywhere," she said. At this moment Lily entered, and good temper did not beam from her countenance. "I had permission from Smithfield to go out," she began defiantly. "Smithfield sent me over to look up a boy to replace Bryn." "The trouble is not over you going out," said Crane. "What is the trouble, then?" "The trouble," said Mrs. Falkener, seeing Crane hesitate for a word, "is that you have on my daughter's hat." "Your daughter's hat," said Lily contemptuously. "Nothing of the kind." Mrs. Falkener turned to Tucker. "This is intolerable. This is insufferable," she cried, "to have that woman standing there in Cora's hat, which I chose myself. and paid $45 for at a sale, and cheap too for a Diane Duray model, to stand there and tell me I don't know the hat when I see it." "Cora," said Crane, "is that your hat?" "Why, yes, I'm afraid it is," answered Cora rather reluctantly. "Lily, have you any explanation to make?" he asked. "None at all," replied the housemaid, looking like white granite. "Cora," said Crane, "you did not by any chance say anything that could have led Lily to believe you meant to give her that hat?" Miss Falkener smiled. "No," she said, "my mother would not encourage such a generous impulse in regard to a French hat." "Then, Lily," said Burton, "take off the hat and give it back to Miss Falkener, and go and pack your things and be out of the house in an hour." "You must have her luggage searched," said Tucker. "Give the hat back?" cried Mrs. Falkener. "What good will that do? Do you suppose that I would ever let Cora put it on her head again after that woman has worn it? She may as well keep it now." "I shall," answered Lily. "It's mine." The girl's determination impressed Crane more than it did the others, though even he could not see any loophole of escape for her. He rang the bell, and when Smithfield appeared, he said, "Smithfield, I have dismissed Lily. We found her leaving the house in one of Miss Falkener's hats." "Oh, begging your pardon, no, sir," said Smithfield. "It is really not Miss Falkener's hat. Surely, Lily, you explained it." "I don't care to speak to them at all," answered Lily. "Oh, that's no way to speak to your employers, my girl," said Smithfield. "The explanation is this, sir. I understand that those great French houses send out many hats alike, sir, and this one was given to Lily by a friend, by Mrs. Croslet Billington, to be exact, sir, she thinking it a trifle youthful for herself after she had bought it. And I can't say but what she was right, sir, she being a lady now nearing 60, though hardly looking 45. The first evening the ladies came, sir, when Lily had done unpacking their things, she mentioned in the kitchen that Miss Falkener had a hat similar to her own, and we all advised her, sir, under the circumstances, not to wear it during the lady's stay, as being more suitable and respectful, and she agreed not to. But young women, when they have pretty things, dear me, sir, they do like to wear them, and that, I presume, is why she put on the hat, in spite of our warnings, and I'm sure she regrets it heartily, sir." "I don't," said Lily. "I'm right glad I did." "Tut, tut," said Smithfield. "No way to answer. No way to answer." "Cora," Crane said, "would you go up and see if your hat is in your room?" Cora agreed and left the room at once. Complete silence reigned until she returned. She was carrying in her hand a hat, the exact duplicate of that which the housemaid wore. They looked from one to another. Lily's triumph was complete. "Lily," said Crane, "an apology seems to be due to you, which I have great pleasure in offering you, but I must say that if you had been just a trifle more civil, the whole mistake might have been cleared up sooner and more agreeably." "I think it is outrageous," observed Mrs. Falkener, rising. "I think it perfectly outrageous that any servant should own a hat which anywhere but at a special sale must have cost $60 or $70. "And now I'll tell you what I think is outrageous," said Lily, her soft Southern drawl taking on a certain vigor. and that is that women like you, calling themselves ladies, should be free to browbeat and insult servants as much as they please." "Shut up, Lily," said Smithfield, but she paid no attention. "No," she said, "no one knows what I've put up with from this insolent old harridan, and now I am going to say what I think." "Oh, no, Lily," said Crane, taking her by the arm, "you really are not. We're all sorry for the incident, but really, you know you can't be allowed to talk like that." "But, Mr. Crane," drawled Lily, "you don't appreciate what a dreadful woman she is. No one could, who did not have to hook her up every evening." Between Smithfield and Crane, she was hustled out of the room. Alone in the hall, Crane and his butler held a consultation. "She's got to go, Smithfield. Why in the world wouldn't she hold her tongue? Poor girl, I felt every sympathy with her." "Oh, sir," exclaimed Smithfield, "what shall we do? Jane Ellen and I really can't run the house entirely alone, sir." "Of course not, of course not," Burton answered. "You must get some more servants. Get as many as you please, black, white, red. But for heaven's sake get the kind that won't be impertinent to Mrs. Falkener." Smithfield shook his head. "That's a kind that will be hard to find, sir, begging your pardon," he observed. Crane thought it best to ignore this remark. "I tell you what to do," he said. "Call up Mr. Elliot and say we should all be glad to accept his invitation to lunch today if he can still have us. That will give you a little time to look about you. By tomorrow you ought to be able to find someone." He waited to get Elliot's answer before he returned to the sitting room, where he saw that Tucker and Mrs. Falkener had had a long, comfortable talk about their grievances and their own general righteousness. He hated to break into the calm that had succeeded by announcing that they were all going out to lunch. "Burton," said Mrs. Falkener, directing a stern glance at her daughter, "I explained to you yesterday. That was an invitation I did not care to accept." "I know," said Crane, "but my household is now so short-handed that it seemed a question of lunching out or getting no lunch at all. If you really object to going to Elliot's, I dare say they could give you something cold at home. If you did not mind that, you will come, won't you, Cora?" "With pleasure," answered Cora. Crane's manner was unusually decisive, and Mrs. Falkener saw that it was time to make things smooth. "Oh, no," she said. "No, if you are all going, I shall go too. Only home is so delightful. I hate the thought of leaving it." "It hasn't seemed very delightful to me for the past few minutes," answered Burton, "but I'm glad if you've enjoyed it." "Oh, Burton, my dear, you take these things too seriously," replied Mrs. Falkener. "A little trouble with the servants, an everyday occurrence in a woman's life. You of the stronger sex must not let it worry you so much. When you've kept house as many years as I have, you'll learn the great thing is to be firm from the beginning. That's the only criticism I could make of you, Bert. A little weak, a little weak." Tucker here rose, pressing his hand over his eyes. "I think if you don't mind, I won't go," he said. "I've a slight headache. Oh, nothing much, but I'll lunch quietly here if you'll let me. A slice of cold meat and a glass of sherry is all I shall require." If Crane were weak, he did not look so at this moment. "I'm sorry, Solon," he answered, "but it would be very much more convenient if you went with us." He had no intention of leaving Tucker alone in the house with Jane Ellen, while Smithfield was scouring the countryside for fresh servants. "I'm not thinking so much of myself," said Tucker, "but of you. I fear I should not be much of an addition to the party." "But I think of you, Tuck," answered his host. "What in the world would there be for you to do at home, except talk to the cook?" Tucker said rather ungraciously that of course he would go if Crane wished him to, but that Crane, however, did not allow him to finish his sentence. "Thank you," he said briskly. "That will be delightful. We shall be starting at 12:30. Join me next time for another romantic chapter of Come Out of the Kitchen by Alice Duer Miller, here on Love's Tender Flame. Until then, love deeply and live beautifully.